the influence you have over those cross-functional partners, over those stakeholders, vendors, providers, members, that's what it takes to be good in any quality program, especially Medicare Star Ratings. So that's what we focus on.
Welcome to the Healthcare Grind, formerly the Healthcare Hustle. We do what entrepreneurs often do and pivoted our podcast name in the first couple episodes because we realized someone else has that name, even though we did quite a bit of research. Oops. Regardless, this is still the podcast where we cut through the noise in the healthcare industry to bring you the latest trends, innovations, and insider insights. I'm Jess Harthcock, and I'm joined by my co-host, Hecht, as we embark on a journey to connect early-stage healthcare companies, payer executives, and investors with the knowledge and perspectives that matter most. Get ready to grind in the fast-paced realm of healthcare innovation. And for more advanced content, go to healthcaregrind.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Healthcare Hustle. My name is Hecht. I'm your host. It's great to see you. I am joined today by Jessica Harthcock, my co-host. Jess, say hi.
Hey, guys. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Jess. And we're also joined by a great guest today, Rex Wallace. Go figure. He is the CEO of Rex Wallace Consulting. And what we're here to talk about, very convenient. I don't know where you came up with that one. But it was one of two names, and I'm guessing that one just spoke to you a little bit more. But
something like that.
What we're going to talk about today is really all things quality. So, you hear about star ratings and HEDIS measures and CAP scores and different things like that. And it's very confusing. And as you know, Rex, our audience, really early stage entrepreneurs, health plan executives and investors. Can you kind of level us up a little bit at a high level and help us make sense of those three different terms I just gave you and how they fit?
Yeah. And, think of Medicare Star Ratings as sort of it's one program that takes into account, it sort of pulls into the program, actually more like 6 different pieces from different quality improvement programs that the CMS already has in place, or just the data that exists. So in a nutshell, Medicare Star Ratings is, it's a program of about 40 measures. It can vary year to year if measures are retired or new measures are brought in, but 40 measures. A subset of those measures come from HEDIS. HEDIS are, if you're a health plan, obviously, it's one of the most important things you do is clinical effectiveness, right? So clinical outcomes, clinical screenings, those kinds of measures are in the HEDIS category. And typically 10 to 12 of those HEDIS measures are pulled into the Medicare Star Ratings program. Not all HEDIS measures. There are lots of HEDIS measures, some specific to Medicaid plans or other lines of business, but these are Medicare specific measures, and about 10 to 12 of the, arguably most important ones are pulled into the program. Cancer screenings, diabetic, blood sugar control, things like that, plan on calls, readmissions. So, let's say 20 to 25% of Medicare Star Ratings is HEDIS. Then another 15 to 20, depending upon the year, can be up to 35% right now of those measures are made up from CAPS. CAPS is a patient experience survey delivered to a random sample of Medicare eligible members or Medicare Advantage members. And so 9 measures from the Medicare Star Ratings program come from the CAPS survey. CAPS surveys 68 questions, I think. 20 of those questions are pulled into Medicare Star Ratings from the form 9 measures. Okay. And then there are other pieces. So there are pharmacy measures that come from, that are the Pharmacy Quality Alliance is the steward for medication adherence and statin use in persons with diabetes, things like that. So there are a handful of those. Then there are some health outcomes survey measures, another survey. Then there are operational measures like voluntary disenrollment, complaints, what percentage of your members complain to CMS about you. So 40 measures all in, big subset HEDIS, big subset CAPS, but Medicare Star Ratings is sort of its own conglomerate of those mishmash of measures, if you will. So help.
Wow. Yeah, very, very helpful. So really appreciate that. Do you mind if we step back for a minute and maybe get a little background on you?
Yeah. Yeah. So Rex, as you said, and aptly the CEO of the narcissistically named Rex Wallace Consulting, right? So when I started consulting, I had a lot of friends say, hey, just go out with your name at first. You're a solopreneur. It's you by yourself. So just let people know your name. And so I did that, and have been able to get traction. It's stuck, and have grown since then, and have 7 employees now. A mix of, we have data scientists and We have a chief operating officer and a chief strategy officer. We have a host of consultants now, and we still have this name, and still someday I think I'm going to change it. But if we can think of something great, right, that sticks. But yeah, we're a quality improvement consulting firm. I've been in Medicare Star Ratings since Medicare Star Ratings really became important back in around 2012. It's all I've done since then. Our firm focuses on other lines of business all around quality, like you mentioned at first, Lon. So Medicaid, marketplace, commercial, and all the things that are kind of around that: health equity, obviously organizational health, organizational engagement, and culture, which is a big part of what we do, because we think quality, being a matrix program, it depends on not what you control, but what you influence a lot of times. And, so the influence you have over those cross-functional partners, over those stakeholders, vendors, providers, members, that's what it takes to be good in any quality program, especially Medicare Star Ratings. So that's what we focus on.
That's awesome. So Rex, you have an incredible and a vast amount of experience in this area. How did you become an expert in this field?
Just by doing it. Well, so when I got introduced to it when I was leading Medicare operations, or I was the director of operational improvement for a health plan, and I was playing a role in one of the measures. Medicare Star Ratings was just starting to be introduced, so I was just on the very fringe of it. And then a company, because of my operational background and some familiarity with the Medicare Star Ratings program, which a lot of people didn't have back then in 2012, a health plan recruited me to come lead Medicare Star Ratings, to be the director of stars. And I saw it as a great opportunity. It was a new program. Lots of revenue is tied to it. A plan, Medicare plans have to be good at stars to grow. So, it can be 5% of revenue and, or more. So I got into it and just learned, right? Had some great consultants also kind of working with our plan, and some great partners, vendors and providers who I learned a ton from. And just a lot of failure too, right? So we, you learn through those trials. We actually, in one of my early years, we actually fell. So in Medicare Star Ratings, you have to be 4 stars or higher to get the revenue, which you reinvest back into the plan to be more competitive. So it's not like you go, you apply it all to P&L, to your bottom line. You reinvest it back into the plan. You have to. We fell below 4 stars one of my first years, and we lost $60 million, for our health plan. And it was inarguably the worst moment of my professional career, but also by far the most important, because, when we fell and we lost all that money, and I had to be in front of our executive steering committee and our communicating to our board of directors, what are we going to do to fix it? Our urgency ramped up. We figured out pretty quickly what works and what doesn't, and, by failing a little bit early. So that failure was a big part of becoming aware of how to be good at it.
Well, you kind of alluded to it. Why are star ratings so important? You mentioned a little bit about revenue. Could you get really explicit for our listeners on what are the teeth in that for folks? At what cut point do you get revenue? Where do you lose it? And I have to imagine that losing or dropping below 4 stars was probably one of the best learning opportunities for you. It probably set you up for a consulting career, because you had to really learn how to jump in really quick. Everybody's a hero when you're performing, but when you're not, you've got to figure out how to get back on top. So it's probably a great learning experience. But can you tell us what those teeth are and why it's so important?
Yeah, and it definitely was. It was the most important learning experience probably of my career. It wouldn't have necessarily been. It didn't have to be, but it definitely became that. I think a lot of how you frame it and how you look back on it and reflect on it, and determines that. It could have easily just destroyed my career, probably, right? But it became a really important moment. On the financial side, yeah. So Medicare Star Ratings is what CMS did if I'm a Medicare beneficiary, I log on to Medicare.gov. I'm looking at all the Medicare Advantage health plan options in my area, my service area, my zip code. And I'm looking on there, and it tells me things like the monthly premium, the expected out-of-pocket cost, like all these kind of financial amounts, but nothing on there historically told me but how good is this plan at really serving me? How high are they in quality? What's their member experience like? So CMS created this scorecard, Medicare Star Ratings, 40-ish measures every year, consistent scorecard. Every Medicare plan is scored the same. And they began putting that star rating on Medicare Plan Finder, much like on Amazon or Yelp, where you're looking at reviews, right? Like I know when I'm buying something, I filter by 4.5 stars or something like that, depending on what I'm buying and maybe how many choices there are. So CMS wanted a quality indicator that members could look at and say, okay, that's who I want. So to do that, and to make it really meaningful for health plans, they tied revenue to it. So if you are 4 stars or higher on your overall star rating, then you receive quality bonus payments from CMS that you reinvest back into your plan to stay competitive or get more competitive. In a nutshell, at a very high illustrative level, think of that as around $50 per member per month. That's wow. You're right. So I think it's, 10,000 members, that's $6 million a year. Right. And so very meaningful. And you can imagine if you don't have that revenue and your competitor does, and they're using that to reduce their premium or to reduce the cost share for the member or to enhance the benefits and add more supplemental benefits like an over-the-counter drug card or transportation benefit. If you don't have that revenue, you quickly become irrelevant, right? And you don't grow nearly as fast, and you may be even growing the wrong direction or shrinking, right?
No, that makes an awful lot of sense. So, in addition to financial penalties or upside and downside, I should say, what other teeth are there? I know there are more teeth to it than that, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can, if you are, and there are more teeth. Actually, introduced now, right, on the low side. So I guess on the high side first. So if you're 4 stars or higher, you get the most revenue. And without getting too in the weeds, you get a little bit more revenue if you're 4.5 stars, but not really any more revenue if you're 5 stars. So, but there's a big benefit or a benefit to being 5 stars over 4.5 even, meaning that you can 5-star plans. Medicare members are allowed to enroll. They can typically only enroll in the annual enrollment period, right? So, from October through December, essentially. They can make one change in the open enrollment period from January through March. But if you want to go to a 5-star plan, you can enroll once any time of the year. So 5-star plans are allowed to grow year round in a way that any plan below 5 stars cannot. So you have this year-round enrollment growth possibility. A lot of people say it hasn't necessarily generated a ton of movement, right? But that option is there. But probably the most important benefit of being 5 stars is just the branding, right? The public image, the reputation. So you actually get on Medicare Plan Finder, when a member or a Medicare beneficiary is looking at all the options, the 5-star plans has a gold star, and it says this plan received Medicare's highest rating, 5 stars. So it's very clear that is the best plan quality-wise on the list, or one of them. So there is this big, PR benefit to being 5 stars. If you are below 3 stars for 3 straight years, you get the low performing icon. So you actually get a warning sign. It's not good at all. You get a warning sign next to your name on Medicare Plan Finder. And I think if members actually try to still enroll in that plan, they get a letter from CMS saying, are you sure you want to enroll this plan? Because they have performed, poorly for a number of years. And there's also what I was referencing to even more teeth. CMS is now saying, if you are low performing like that, they can keep you. Well, they can close your contract, which they actually just did to a few contracts recently, and I won't throw out any names. But they can keep your parent organization from growing new contracts, or moving into new markets. So there are some big, penalties from being low performing, and definitely some key benefits to being high performing, outside of just financially.
Yeah. So let's kind of, for some of our listeners who may not be as familiar with this area, how many plans are we talking are 5 stars? kind of help us understand the threshold that it takes for a plan to achieve that kind of ranking.
Or like distribution, Jess, like what percentage fall in each bucket? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's definitely changed the last handful of years because of COVID, right? And some of the relief that CMS allowed from COVID. Before COVID, there were never more than 21 contracts in a single year that got 5 stars. And we say contracts, one health plan might just have one contract. It's a Medicare contract. It's called an H number, but a large parent org like Centene has 100 contracts. Like United Healthcare has more than that. The Aetna has 35 or something like that. So multiple contracts. Only 21 contracts before COVID in a single year ever got 5 stars. It was less than 5% of all contracts. So very small group. After COVID, CMS had this disaster relief policy that actually allowed plans to use their scores from the COVID year or the year before COVID. And that allowed plans to, whichever one was better you could use. So it allowed plans to perform a lot higher in that year. So, we were up to, I think 57 or something. So there's still a lot of plans that there are still, way more than 21 that have 5 stars now, but it's still, 5 to 10% probably of all contracts. The meat of them are, 3.5 and 4 stars. There are a growing number that are below 3.5 stars right now because of some other changes. CMS also, around the time of COVID, increased the weight of member experience measures to be some of the heaviest weighted measures that there were. And if you were really good at that helped your math a lot and helped you become a 5-star plan. And if you were not good at it, which a lot of plans are not, it forced them, they were maybe a 3.5 star plan. And now with the extra weight on these member experience measures that they were not good at, they became a 2.5 star plan. So now they're in that sort of yellow flag area, right?
So is that why, if you look towards the end of last year, it was kind of a bloodbath for star ratings for a lot of plans? Is that what it was? It was the member experience piece that really dinged them?
That was a piece of it, but the big factor last year was a new methodology that CMS used called Tukey. So It's called the Tukey outlier methodology, or Tukey outlier deletion methodology, and it's named after a statistician, John Tukey, from years ago. But it's this method that removes outliers. So there have been complaints from health plans sort of all throughout STAR's history that the cut points are unpredictable and then they move too much in it, because we don't know what the cut points are on the measures that we're performing against until next year, until after we're done competing on them. So we perform all year long, not knowing what the cut points are for the 3-star threshold, the 4-star threshold, the 5-star threshold. And then after the measurement year is over, CMS takes all the data, and puts it together and establishes these 5-star clusters, and then tells you what the cut points were after you're all done with the performance, right? So a lot of complaints from plans saying, I can't budget, I can't project revenue in the future because I don't have any idea to predict what my star rating is going to be. So CMS tried to make the cut points more predictable last year by implementing this outlier deletion methodology, by removing outliers. So now the performance is easier to predict, but that made, because most of the outliers were on the bottom end of each measure, it made the cut points be much higher than they were historically for many measures. And that caused a lot of plans to lose in star ratings in that single year. It'll be easier going forward to predict, but in that one year, it was a bloodbath.
Well, one thing I'll say is thank you. I know a lot about star ratings. I did not realize that. So that is something new that I picked up today. So thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. So in a minute, I was hoping we could, because we have a lot of earlier stage entrepreneurs, I'd love to kind of, in a minute, kind of pivot over to talking about, when you think about selling to a health plan, everyone says that they impact star ratings, but what are ways, and, can you talk about some of the measures that matter most? And then, Can you talk about how you would anchor your solution and actually be able to prove value? Because it's really hard to prove the value and that you're moving the needle for them. Before we get to that question, I did throw that question out, but could you just take 30 seconds and help the audience understand, if you're measuring this year, what does that mean? Like, you measure this year, when does the star rating count, and when do you actually get your revenue? Because that's something that a lot of people don't really understand. If you could hit that quickly, and then we can talk about how we help earlier stage entrepreneurs anchor to some of these, these things that they can drive value on to be helpful.
Yeah, and that is one of the most confusing aspects of stars, is the timeline. So we're sitting here, late January 2024. So if we think of 2024 as the measurement year, so office visits that happen in calendar year 2024, medications that are picked up and filled in 2024, that's our measurement year. So we get through the measurement year, and then next year, 2025, is considered, let's say, the data collection year. So that's when the CAP survey next spring asks members about their experience in 2024. So it's delivered in 2025, but it asks. So still thinking about measurement year 2024, we have all the office visits and medication refills, and then in 2025 we have the data collection. So the HEDIS charts are collected for the office visits that happened back in 2024. In the fall of 2025, after CMS has collected all that data, established the new cut points, and determined what the star rating is for everyone, they give plans a preview of their star rating in August and September, and then they go public in October, right before AEP, so they can go on Medicare Plan Finder. And that is the 2026 star rating, because that's when it will be on Medicare Plan Finder, starting in October of 2025, when members are enrolling in a 2026 plan. So it's the 2026 star rating determined by performance back in 2024, right? And sort of in supplemental data collected in 2025. And then the revenue for that 2026 star rating is applied to the 2027 bid. So the revenue impact, so premium, any kind of premium impact, is in 2027 for the performance back in 2024.
Wow, great job. We'll pay you in 3 years.
Exactly. That's kind of one of the challenges from a CFO perspective, right? Like, how they know now, they've gotten much more, familiar with it. But at first it was like, we're not going to get revenue on this for 3 or 4 years, right? So how much do we want to invest?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So Rex, switching over a little bit to kind of startup mode. As a former founder and CEO of a company, I once had a CMO tell me, stars is king, HEDIS is queen. If you can impact those two things, I want your solution. Tell me what that means to you when you hear that from someone like a CMO, and tell maybe the listeners why that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the stars is king thing. I mean, I obviously subscribe to that because I'm a little biased, obviously. But I mean,
and Rex, you are the king of star ratings. Let's be honest.
I see firsthand how plans struggle if they're not good at it, right? How they don't grow, how they are at risk of being terminated. So it is something that you have. If you're in Medicare, it's kind of like stars and risk adjustment, that's kind of the two-headed beast, if you will, right? That you have to slay. So if I'm, but there are so many facets to it, right? So many pieces, so many different data sources. I could think of 100 if I was going to go start up a new vendor focused on improving star ratings. There's no shortage of opportunities, right? I would say there are plenty of places where plans are challenged. Lon, what you were kind of referring to, though, is really important as far as understanding whatever your solution is. I think what's most important is because I've been the buyer, right? I've been the guy sitting in the star ratings chair and had 100 vendors coming to me saying, "Hey, we can improve your star rating. Hey, we can, help you recover all that revenue that you lost." But you have to be able to tie those, or like connect those dots really clearly and meaningfully, and somewhat quantitatively, for a sophisticated star ratings leader to trust you and to give you a flyer. So there are, Are you looking for specific places to some ideas?
Yeah, I'd love to understand maybe if there are specific ratings that you feel like are easier to impact, or if you think of some of the solutions that are out there today, how do you, like if you're talking to a CMO, and I'll say chief medical officer in this situation, some people might think chief marketing, but if you're talking to a chief medical officer, how do you prove that your solution actually has star ratings value? Are there metrics that are easier to tie to? How do you measure that when the measurement's happening way out in the future? It's a challenging thing, right? I mean, every vendor I've ever seen says that their star ratings, that they do a great job on star ratings and improve it. But how do you actually show proof? Can you help us think through that a little bit? And I know that probably the answer is that's a challenge, right? But anything you could share would be great.
Yeah, it is. It definitely depends, right? So there are, I would say there are times when if it intuitively makes enough sense, right? You can get in the door and maybe get a pilot, right? And that's definitely a good place to start. If you can clearly articulate, this is why it will, even if it hasn't yet, because you have to start somewhere, right? So a pilot is typically a good place to start, but you need to be able to clearly articulate, working with some kind of, external advisor. We work with a lot of vendors to do this, and we pull in an actuarial consulting firm, sometimes to look at the impact that it could have, right? To look in the projected claims impact even, and to know the cost impact and the STARS impact to it. That's one. If you have a case study, even with one contract or one state or a small plan or something, doing a case study and actually being able to measure the before and after impact, and then articulate that's a good thing too. I guess the more expensive it is, obviously, the more the CFO and the CMO is going to require some kind of hard quantitative impact. Understanding. So as far as certain places, I think about the lowest performing measures across the industry, where there do not seem to be top-notch solutions. It seems like every solution has some kind of flaw. Even and some of these are single weight measures, so they're not necessarily hugely impactful from an overall score, but they are holding you back some because they are, you may be scoring. We know a lot of 5-star plans that score 1 star on, let's say, osteoporosis management in women, right? So women that have a fracture have to get a bone density screening in 6 months. There's this really tight window, and it's frequently a very low performing measure, and there don't seem to be a lot of great solutions out there. So, osteoporosis is a measure I would tackle. The health outcomes survey measures, so falls prevention, not just helping members prevent falls, but the measure actually is based on a survey that asks the member, did your doctor or another healthcare provider talk to you about ways to prevent falling? And, we've had a lot of vendors who will work with the member to initiate the conversation with the provider, even pay them an incentive sometimes. But what we find in market research is that still doesn't necessarily result in a positive score, because the member still thinks, well, the provider didn't talk to me, I talked to them. So you have to understand the measure that you're going after at such a nuanced level, and then actually, make sure you're going the right way to influence it. And then data collection is a huge part of STARS. And I think, that's where we see a lot of startups focusing is on, tapping into the EMR and creating easier ways to share data with the provider partners so that they're on the same page. That's a big one.
Yeah, no, hey, I'm just going to say that's some good input, because we do have, once again, early stage entrepreneurs, some that haven't even started. So here are a couple of ideas of areas of business that you could think about that value would be driven from. So Jess, I saw you had a question.
Yeah. So on kind of that vein, What are there, I guess, in your mind, more important measures to target than others? If you were giving advice to some of these early stage companies, would you say go after this particular set of measures because they're higher value to a plan?
And could you mention what you alluded to it, triple weighted, things like that?
Yeah.
That might be important for the listeners to understand.
Yeah, there are a few things that are important in this answer, because it's different if you're looking for in general which measures are most important to most plans. That's one thing. That doesn't mean that those are the most important measures for a specific plan, right? So if I'm just trying to create a product that meets the need for the majority, and I'm going after probably the most important measures for a bunch of plans, I mean, it's hard not to focus somewhat on the weight, right? So measures have different weights. There are process measures that are a weight of 1, right? So that's the smallest weight measure. So all measures have a weight of 1, 3, 4, or 5 right now. So process measures are 1. They're the lowest weighted. It doesn't mean they're not really important for certain plans, but by and large, they're not going to be as heavily invested in as a 3 weight or triple weight measure we call. These are like medication adherence. That's a huge category. There are 3 of them. They're all triple weighted. There are also, some HEDIS measures that are triple weighted. The outcome. So plan all-cause readmissions, controlling blood pressure, diabetic blood sugar control, measures like that. Those are hard, and they need a lot of investment, and they get a lot of attention. Right now, there is this whole suite of member experience measures, or technically, I think it's patient experience, complaints, and access measures. It's the CAP survey. It's most of the CAP survey measures, and it's the operational measures around disenrollment and appeals processing. Those CMS recently changed to a weight of 4. So they are some of the heaviest weighted measures, still, as of today, going into the next CAP survey, which launches in March. But CMS changed its mind. It's actually reducing them back to 2 after this year. So they will lose some investment, I presume, and will not be quite as heavily weighted as those triple weighted measures. There are 2 aggregate measures that are weights of 5 each, but those really are take the scores of a bunch of measures and roll them into 1. So really, we're only talking about measures that are weighted 1, 3, or 4. So the 3 and 4 weight measures are obviously medication adherence, the HEDIS control, and the experience measures are the most important right now. But where I was going to go real quick is there are these 2 other pieces of star ratings called the reward factor. It's a bonus that you get at the end if you are a high-performing plan and have low variability across your measures. You can get a half-star increase. Virtually every 5-star plan is a 4.5-star plan with a big reward factor. That's all it is, right? So you have to get this big reward factor to be 5 stars typically. But that reward factor is made up of how high your base score is and how low the variability is across the measures. A very sophisticated plan, or with the help of a key analytics vendor, you can understand which of your other measures are influencing that reward factor the most. And those are the most important measures for you if you're trying to be 5 stars, right? So, and they might not be the heaviest weighted measures. It might be some of those 1 weight measures that if you just increase a few more points on each one, then you get the big reward factor. So that's where there's some nuance. If I'm a vendor, if I'm going after a key prospect, I ideally want to try to understand that. I want to know not just which are the heaviest weighted measures. That's the easy way to approach it. Yeah. But for them specifically, what are the most important measures that are driving their reward factor in their improvement measure?
That's a great summary and really helpful. I don't think I've ever heard it.
That's really in the weeds too. Sorry.
Yeah, no, well, we wanted to understand that better. Go ahead, Jess. Did you have another question?
No, I was just commenting on how helpful that is. I mean, I've been in the industry for 15 years, and hearing it explained in that way is really helpful, and I think will add a lot of value to our listeners. Thanks, Rex.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you talk about like a triple weighted or a quadruple weighted measure, I mean, in essence, if you got a 5-star in that measure, it's worth 4 times 5 stars, like in terms of the value that it's adding on there, correct? compared to another measure that might have a 1. I just want to make sure that people fully understand that it really drives tremendous amount of value. If you can do well in that measure, if you do poorly in that measure, it really hurts, right?
Absolutely.
So, it's something to think about. I wanted to ask you this. A lot of early stage companies are trying to get into these value-based care kind of constructs with payers. And one thing that I hear, I advise some early stage companies, and a lot of them talk about how they can impact HEDIS or STAR measures or things like that. So what kind of experience, or what are you seeing out there in terms of companies that are going to health plans and saying, hey, will you give us a spiff or a bonus on each gap we close or something like that? Are you seeing a lot of that? And could you share a little bit about your experience with that? Because I think that's an important thing when you're talking about value. You can charge for your solution, but let's not forget about some of these other things that you can do that can have substantial impact. You may be able to capture some additional revenue for this and drive a ton of additional value for the plan. So just curious as to your take on that, Rex.
Yeah. You're asking about vendors specifically? So vendors that are...
Yeah. So like if a vendor's working with a health plan and they're getting maybe a per member per month or a cost per use or whatever it is, are you seeing a lot of them say, hey, give us $15 for every gap we close or things like that? What's your experience? And I'm making up a number.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. And I think, the upside and downside both, right? The vendor's not asking for the downside, but the health plan is, right? So yeah, it's a mix. And I would say some of the more meaningful and, aggressive contracts, which sometimes you have to put in place, right, to get the business, put it at risk, right? So at risk contracts. So, if we, this is the number that we need to hit for you to achieve your star rating goal on this measure, these measures, whatever. Right. If we exceed that, then there's some extra money that comes our way as the vendor. If we don't reach that, then we will give you back, 5%, 10% of the money. Right. Or you don't owe it to us. So, definitely have been seeing that for a little while. And I would say it's only getting more aggressive. I think vendors are trying to use that obviously to say, hey, trust us, right? Like we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to try. So we are going to put money at risk because we believe in ourselves so much that we can hit that. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing that more and more. And I think it's, if I'm a vendor and I'm a CEO trying to launch one, then I'm definitely doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. You better have a lot of confidence if you're going to do that. Right. But that's really important that you show that. So one is you're talking about, having up and downside risk on your fees. I was talking about that, but I'm also talking about saying I have a fee, but for every gap I close, I get a certain amount of money or something like that. I'm seeing more and more of that happening out there as well. So I was just curious if you're seeing, if you've seen some of that or not.
I'm not seeing as much of that. No.
Okay.
Or at least not in my chair, but not to say it's not there.
Well, I feel like that I started to notice that maybe about 5-10 years ago, more on the West Coast in California, where they're capping out the risk to the physician groups and everything like that. So they were trying to get the physician groups to close gaps in care. And now I'm starting to see it happen more across the country in just general models that people are going and saying, hey, I'd like to get paid X, but if I can close this, and this, maybe there's an extra $10, $15, $20 each one of these gaps. So that's what I meant. I wasn't sure if you were seeing that or not.
On the physician side, yeah, sorry. So yeah, definitely.
But I'm talking now on the vendor side. The physician side, it's been happening for a long time.
Exactly.
Sorry for the confusion there.
Yeah.
Hey, I know, first of all, this has been a great conversation and very, very helpful. Probably need to wrap it up pretty soon. Jess, are there any questions that are kind of still in your mind that you want to hit that are really important at this point?
No, not on quality. I just kind of more of a fun one for you, Rex. Lon and I love to get to know our list or our the folks we're interviewing. Just kind of, we know you're an expert in your field. We kind of feel like we know now what makes you tick. So if
you're making me nervous,
don't be nervous. This is a good question.
This is where we haze you.
This is it right here.
Look at the time. I got to go, guys. Gosh.
If you just quickly tell us, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing in healthcare? How else would you be impacting it?
My favorite thing to do is this would not necessarily be helping, but I like to write a lot. Right. So
Cool.
I would, if I had more time to write helpful articles on LinkedIn, to write a book, right, on just the things I've learned in healthcare over the years. And it would be, and I think the thing I'm probably most passionate about is organizational health, right? So again, stars, quality being matrix, and where these people that are performing on your measures don't report to you, right? So you have to influence them. And we just have, in our work over the past 7 years in consulting, and then obviously years before that, just in working in health plans, example after example of good ways to do that and bad ways to do that, right? And seeing that be such a differentiator in not just your performance scores, but in how happy these employees are to work at this company, how supported they feel, how engaged they feel. And then the members feel that and the providers feel that. So, I think writing about organizational health would be what I would be doing. Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Really
not that
cool.
anyone would read it, but I would definitely be writing it.
I'm going to look out for it. I expect something in the next 6 months. I'm going to look at your LinkedIn and just follow it and wait for that.
Okay. So that kind of brings me to the next thing, and we're going to wrap in a second, but two things. One, I'm going to ask, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more? And two, I'd love for you to give a little shout out to your podcast, because I think people that have interest in star ratings should be taking a deeper dive and should listen to your content. So could you share how to get in touch with you and tell them about the title of your podcast so they can find it and where they can find it?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, right? So that's probably the best place. It's Rex Wallace. I'm sure there are 100 of us on there, but Rex Wallace, CEO of Rex Wallace Consulting. That's I'm probably the only one that's that, right?
Probably,
hopefully. And then in my email address is, rex.wallace@rexwallaceconsulting.com. So pretty easy too. Our podcast, we actually, we partner with the Stars analytics firm called Hyperleft, and they're the key sponsor, and the co-host, his name is Mick Toomey, and I. So we lead this podcast called Rising Stars, and it's all about star ratings. And we actually just wrapped up our wrap up episode for last year, that we're going to publish probably today, actually, I think. But it's mainly about star ratings, and it's, interviews kind of like this, right? Where we interview experts in organizations, health plan stars, leaders, maybe key vendor partners, maybe other consultants, or we've interviewed pharmacy quality alliance and people like that, talking about the stars program, how to be good at it. It's definitely one of the most fun things I do. I'm sure, like you guys in this podcast, which I love, by the way. So, it's called Rising Stars. So it's on YouTube. We have a YouTube page. It's on Spotify, etc.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, we're going to wrap up another episode of Healthcare Hustle. Rex, thank you so much for joining us. And Jessica and I would like to wish everybody have a great day.
See you next time.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jess.
Bye.
Bye.
As we wrap up this episode of the Healthcare Grind, we want to thank you, our incredible audience, for tuning in. If you found today's insights valuable, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback fuels our grind. For more exclusive content and updates, visit our website, healthcaregrind.com. Until next time, keep grinding, stay informed, and lead the charge in shaping the future of healthcare. This is Jess and Lon signing off from the Healthcare Grind.